Yeah, I'm pleased to see it moving, but my position was made without the danger of war. I am trading basically on technicals, but that chart
Mm.
is wonderful because you can see that high from 2008, and I will guarantee that 2008 high is going to be taken out. So I will be staying long for quite some time.
Perhaps we can touch on one, the success of our latest trades, and also how war affects these things and what it might mean for it going forward. I know for us, we're definitely saying that this is going to take out all-time highs as oil always does. Oh, yeah, so yeah,
Yeah,
here's oil, and it's performing very nicely off of the levels. Couple of off the levels we were talking about, made a nice strong base here. Got above its 200, couple of buys in there, and now we're absolutely skyrocketing, which is
that's
lovely.
right.
Yeah,
Well, we've been talking about oil for more than a year as a good store of value, a good investment to have. And for the first year, it went nowhere. But we got another video, what about 2 weeks ago, that when it was around in the low 60s. And that was based on on several things. We didn't talk about the risk of war, but we talked about, if you look at that chart, I can guarantee you it's going to take out its high. Nothing to do
yeah,
with the war. That is a pure technical thing. Its 2008 high was about 147, I think.
yeah.
And when it takes that out, it's going straight to 200. And we see just the very start of this move now. And the war has obviously been the Iran
Catalyst.
war
Yeah,
has been the catalyst for that. But oil, we've been saying for a year, it's going much higher. Our last video 2 weeks ago underlined that, and we spoke about how the oil price in gold was the cheapest it almost ever been. You could buy 77 barrels of oil with an ounce of gold,
mm,
when the long-term average was about 12. And for that reason, we made the point that oil should be somewhere between 200 and $300 a
mm,
barrel. Well, still only it's gone up since we
yeah,
made that video. It's gone up by $20 a barrel. So we've been doing quite nicely from our own positions in oil, and
yeah.
hopefully some viewers have followed our advice and have done the same. But I still say that oil is going much higher. I say we trade on technicals. We don't trade on war news necessarily. But
Mm.
we said in this video, given that it's topical at the moment, that we'll mention the war. And the big news is that the Strait of Hormuz, which is where most of the oil for Europe and Asia comes through the Strait of
Yeah,
Hormuz, and that is basically closed now, and ship owners can't get insurance
yeah,
to take the ships through it, even if they wanted to. So there's no oil flowing, which is a complete disaster. It's obviously going to put the prices up, but it's going to cause all sorts of other problems as well because
mm,
if oil can't get through the Strait of Hormuz, the oil producing countries have got a very limited amount of time that they can produce and store the oil. It doesn't matter what the oil price is for them, because if
yeah,
they can't sell it, if they can't get it through the Strait of Hormuz, they can't sell it, which means ultimately, in some cases, in the case of a country like Kuwait, they've got something like 6 days where they can still operate the wells and store the oil, and after that, they've got to shut down the wells. And of course, when you shut down any kind of oil well or mine, whatever, it's not as easy to reopen it again. So that takes a
mm,
major supply out of the market, which again increases the oil price going forward. And it's a complete disaster for the world, because so many things, everything we buy, depends on transportation to get to us. Sometimes it's used in manufacturing processes. There are obvious things like airlines who depend on oil. And I see the FT reporting this morning that kerosene aviation fuel for Europe is up by 80%.
wow,
So that many airlines have hedged their position. Companies like EasyJet and British Airways announced that they've hedged their position, which basically means that they buy oil futures in advance to make sure that they don't suffer the consequence of anything like this, which is, in their business, given that it's I think about 40% of their cost base is oil. It's a sensible thing to do, but not all airlines do that. And even the ones who have, the hedges run out over time, so they can only hedge for maybe a year in advance. So I think we can be looking forward to much higher airline ticket prices in the future. And of course, the airlines that haven't hedged are going to have to increase their fares much sooner, or else absorb the losses. So we haven't seen any of this coming through into the real economy yet, but we're going to see a lot more of it. And then another point is just going back to what I was saying about these Gulf countries
Mm.
not being able to produce, continue to produce while the Strait of Hormuz is closed. I mean, the one that's got the longest window because they've got a pipeline, Saudi Arabia, they can keep producing for 60 days and still move their oil. But countries like Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, and so on have got literally a couple of weeks that they can continue to produce for without having to stop. And these countries, the point I was going to make, these countries have got huge wealth funds invested in equities, invested in treasury bonds, and so on. So if they can't continue to get money in from selling oil, which is their major source of revenue, then the next thing they have to do is start selling their wealth fund assets like
Mm.
treasuries, like stocks. So that will have a cascading effect as well on
Yeah.
the stock market. And keep in mind, we also made a video on our projection for the stock market, which is for it to fall from here. And
Yeah, I'll just reshare screen because I opened a small little short position just to hedge that as well. Yeah.
these are all the underlying things that rising oil price means, and it's going to make it very difficult for the economy. And I'm sure that the politicians who started this war and are continuing with it, we don't have a position on that, but I'm sure they didn't think through
Yeah.
the consequences of their actions in terms of the economy.
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's a couple of really good points you make there, especially with the airline prices, and these are all things that you don't really hear many people talking about. But I think anyone watching, definitely considering what you're saying about, if they're thinking about even holidays, even small little things not necessarily related to the macro events of markets, they can expect, prices rising in all sorts of areas. Initially, airlines, but then also if the economy starts to tank, then other issues could arise, and we'll cover them as well. I mean, one thing I also saw with some Instagram posts. I think it's the British Empire used to or was the primary insurer of these oil tankers going through the Strait of Hormuz and other places. And this was through Lloyd's, is it Lloyd's of London?
Yes, of course.
And they then stopped basically insuring. But interestingly, I mean, this is kind of a side topic, but interestingly, they stopped doing that. And Trump has come in and basically said that the US military and the US will insure them. So now all these companies are also going to move away from the British Empire and towards Trump. And I mean, it's not really anything
But,
drastic to, yeah.
many of the shipowners have said that that is not acceptable for them, and the insurance companies and so on, they're saying this is not acceptable, and they're still not going to go through the Strait of Hormuz, even with Trump's offer.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. I think the only real solution to this is for this conflict with Iran to come to an end,
Mm.
one way or the other, in the
Quickly or a
next 2 weeks.
settlement. Yeah.
If it doesn't end in the next 2 weeks, there's going to be major problems along the lines of what I've just outlined.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a really good point. Well, for the time being, I mean, bear in mind we have trades. I mean, people don't like people to profit from war. Would you like the war to continue a lot beyond the 2 weeks and oil gets quicker to our targets or
Well, in my mind, I've been long oil for quite a long time now. I
Mm,
do short-term trading of oil too, as you know.
yeah,
But I've had a long-term position in oil, and yeah, I'm pleased to see it moving. But my position was made without the danger of war. I am trading basically on technicals, but that chart is,
mm,
is wonderful because you can see that high from 2008, and I will guarantee that 2008 high is going to be taken out. So I will be staying long for quite some time. I don't know when it's going to be taken out. Maybe it takes 6 months. Maybe it takes another 2 years. We will see. I tend to think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, but
yeah,
time will tell. But until that high, and when the high's taken out, it's going to quickly go to $200.
yeah.
So
In fact, that's the title for the video. I think oil will get over $147 guaranteed. I mean, I know we were
yes.
saying 200 to 300, but
But
all-time highs is a
the,
typical
la- the,
thing
la-
markets are
the
drawn
last
to.
video I said, what can you buy for half the price it was almost 20 years ago?
Yeah,
Today, but I can't say that anymore because it's increased by $20 since I said that 2 weeks ago. So I thought that was quite a good talking point. But we're still what, $60 off the high.
Yeah, still only 85 at the moment. It had a nice little move
So,
today.
so my
Mm.
point is this rise in oil prices has only just started. It's not too late to get in.
Yeah,
This is going to cause this is going to cause all sorts of problems for the world. But why not join us and profit from it? We've been long oil for some time now.
Absolutely, and we can help people with the technicals. I mean, we were saying about these previous, 55 dollars, bounce, 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 and then it started to curl up and break above the 200. That 200 is a level we've always talked about on pretty much every instrument we've been trading. If people are scared to buy now, as you just said, fine to buy now. I would say if it retraces, looking at round numbers, 70, maybe filling the gap there, but then also this 200, I would say I say if it does retrace, very unlikely with the situation, I would say a big buy around there and at
Just,
those levels is
just,
good.
just on that point that you mentioned on the retracement, the U.S. Treasury actually put out a statement saying that we're going to do something about oil prices, and they specifically mentioned the futures market, which I took to mean the U.S. Treasury at some point is going to slam the futures market to get the price to reduce the price of oil. And
Mm,
if they do that, and oil does have a big fall of $5 or $6 per barrel, then you should get in there and buy because yes, governments can manipulate prices in the
yeah,
short term. They can't manipulate them very very long. The markets are too big for them to manipulate for very long.
good
So
point.
if yes, they can slam the futures market, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them doing that, but they can't do it for very long.
Yeah.
Everybody talks when we're talking about the stock market. The stock market as falls. There's apparently some secretive group called the plunge protection team in the US, and every time the market falls too far, the plunge protection team steps in and they buy the futures, they buy the S&P futures, and the market starts going up, and then people follow suit. So they're
Yeah.
going to kind of do the opposite of that with we need to think of a name for it, but they're going to come in perhaps and slam oil. In fact, they've basically said they're going to do it. I kind of expected it today, but it hasn't come yet because the price is up about $4.50, about 8% in crude, the slightly less than Brent this morning.
Mm.
So yeah, it's something to watch out for. That if it does get slammed, then that could be a buying opportunity, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the technical levels because sometimes these things end up following the technical levels and go back and bounce off the moving average. So it may or may not be an opportunity. I personally don't think you should wait for it. I think this move is just
Yeah,
it
you
just
can start a position. It's not a stressful thing if you know that maybe you're cashed, not on leverage. Maybe you've got levels that like I have. If you're going to make a trade, you just stop out and then get back in. But I haven't lost any money trading oil. I've always made money. And yeah, if it was to retrace, I'd say first port of call. Often you have like a red day or two red days and then one green day. Often pulls back to the sort of 9 to 10 moving average, which would be around that sort of. If it goes a little bit higher, probably comes back to 80, and that red line there will probably curl up. Then you've got the 50, which is the blue line, which will probably end up at about 70, and then the 200, which has taken a long time for us to reclaim. You can see how we've really struggled to get above it. Now, as we're curling up again, I reckon the level where a lot of these positions are is going to be a level which is, I'd say, an ultimate floor if it ever got back down there, which I don't think it will. But yeah, I think those couple of levels, combined with round numbers and maybe the gap fill, or just looking across to where the market has previously wicked down to clear it wicked down there. It had a gap, there's a gap fill there to fill. But yeah, I mean, when we entered this position initially, it was clearly just looking across and seeing this is quite an irrational, just slowly bleed of oil. And then it started to get down to very strong levels and get above that moving average. And you could see where sort of pre-COVID levels, the only other times it had small retracements was to around that same level as well. And yeah, if it had fallen below there wasn't really much technical support, but fundamentally it was still very very good opportunity. So yeah, very very nice. I would just say yeah, on the daily. Looking at those moving averages plus any round numbers. So definitely on that 9 moving average, the 50 and the 200, the red, blue, green lines. You'd have to color them in on your own chart. But yeah, you can see that down at moving average 250 and 9. And the reason I bang on about this so much is when we were covering silver, I mean, it absolutely, we profited even more from when we started covering it, back, when it was at 20 down here,
Yeah.
because we were then trading off of the moving averages. You can see it comes to the 50 blue line there, bounces off of it, comes down, bounces off it, and then okay, it falls through, but then it goes to the 200 and bounces off
When,
that. And
when,
you could
when
have
you
been
when you're
trading off those lines.
building a fundamental position, that's the time to add to position every time it bounces back. Add to your position. I don't think you can a market like silver and gold, I don't think you can. Most people can't. Most people aren't looking at the charts every day, so they can't trade
Yes.
it in and out of it like maybe we can. But they certainly can be adding to the positions every time as a fallback to back to those moving averages. They can increase the position, and they can be doing the same thing with oil.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone talks about dollar cost averaging, but no one tells you can time your dollar cost averaging much better by just using these averages. I mean, once again, on gold, it comes back to the 50 pounds, the 50 pounds. Yes, and even with Bitcoin, I mean, we called that for that to crash too. I know we bang on about all our predictions, but yeah, it's still fascinating to see how these things play out exactly to those sort of technicals
Absolutely.
as well. We did on Bitcoin get to the sort of weekly 200, nearly got to it, so it was slightly higher than where we were saying it would go to, but bear in mind we called it 123K. And then now it's nearly at that weekly 200. Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, but very beautiful charts as well. Obviously, if you know how to read them.
If you're a geek about charts like we are.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, and some really good points you make on value points there, and how war affects oil there. I mean, yeah. Maybe just to finish. I mean, historically, how have wars and the situations we've been in affected prices? I mean, pretty much everything we're already saying it's going to rise.
Yes, but keep in mind what wars. The new people have the misconception that news moves the markets, which is not the case. It's human sentiment that moves markets, and 99.9% of people do not understand that. So wars in themselves are not what is moving this. You'll get some short-term volatility around wars.
Mm,
So even if this war ends this weekend and the US declare victory and the regime changes in Iran, my prediction for oil doesn't change. The
okay.
timing, maybe it takes a little longer to get to where it's going to go, and maybe not. The prediction stands whether there's a war or not.
Mm,
And if you look at any markets and how war affects them, particularly the stock markets, which is maybe the best measure of human sentiment
mm,
that exists, if you look at the stock markets and how war affects them, wars tend to happen after a move has been made in the markets.
yeah.
Wars come at the end of a stock market decline because that shows the depth of human sentiment falling to a low. And
Yeah.
there's some very interesting charts on how the sentiment affects things, even things like fashion. I once saw a chart that someone made about the length of women's skirts,
Mm.
and as the market's increased, the skirts get shorter. So, and that applied, from the 1920s right through to the modern age. So it's amazing how human sentiment plays into
Mm,
everything, and that is what moves markets. And that's why war in itself is not a predictor for anything very much. So although it will certainly cause short-term fluctuations like this crisis closing the Strait of Hormuz is definitely causing spikes in oil just now. But if that even if that's resolved, that was not the basis of our prediction
yeah.
because we obviously got no inside information that there was going to be a war with Iran. So
Although there was some very interesting Polymarket trades, but we don't need to touch on
yeah,
that.
yeah. So no, exactly. Some people clearly have inside information, and if you're predicting geopolitical events, it's probably not too difficult to do. That's not
Yeah.
our beat here. We're talking about financial markets, but yeah, no, it is quite interesting. If you go back and look at the charts, and you see wars, and you see even big events like 9/11, for example. When you look at the stock market, 9/11 that came 9/11 happened at the more or less at the bottom of a move in the Dow, and then it went up afterwards.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's true.
so
Because everything does as we've said before, everything kind of does the opposite of what the mainstream would expect it to do, and that's how
yes,
we've been able to profit so much. I mean, one thing we just touched on in our last video, it's good to repeat, is people might be afraid of a market crash, and often oil can follow suit with a market crash. But in the 2008 and also I think 2000 crashes, for the first, you had plenty of time to ride out your trades. I think it took about a year or maybe a year and a half from like
oil kept going up because oil
exactly
actually
for the
hit the
first
high
year or
in
two.
2000.
Yeah, yeah,
Oil kept going up for quite a while, and
yeah.
then fell back substantially
Mm.
afterwards. So again, it doesn't play out the way that people tend to think it might play out, which is why. Yeah, people need to they kind of learn about these things, or they can listen to people like us who have studied the markets for years.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. I do wonder what happened actually during the Trump tariff sell-off that we also predicted. It went down 30%, but it fell about 15% and oil continued to rise. And then randomly on, I'll show you the chart, on April 2nd, it did dump very aggressively and then oil followed suit on that day. There must have been a macro event where yeah, it was interesting because we said the market was going to crash around this day here. It went a little bit higher and then dumped all the way down to here.
Yep.
Crashed to about here. Oil continued to rise at that point, still was rising, and then on April 2nd, I don't know what happened on April 2nd. I'm perplexed as it, but yeah, then that was where a big sell-off and retracement happened, and oil had a little leg lower, surprisingly at that point. But these are some things to just be slightly aware of. But yeah, it's yeah, quite simple. To see, but also I think actually on WhatsApp, I message you. You know, we were talking about war. I think I said to you about the guy in Venezuela who predicted the Venezuela thing clearly with inside information with the Venezuela invasion, and then immediately his only ever trade was to then predict that what's his name, Atala was going to get ousted by February 28th, and that was crazy because it was literally February 27th, was it, that he then
Yes.
got killed? It was crazy.
I think there are a lot of accounts on Polymarket with insider information, and yeah, it's kind of interesting because when you're at the when you've got all this information there in the government, there's a lot of people talking about it, and it's not just people that are actually actively involved because they've all got friends that they talk to, they go home and talk to their husbands, wives,
Mm.
and so on, and so that information gets out there. It's very difficult to keep a secret in an organization like and any organization where there's a lot of people that have to
Yeah.
have advanced knowledge of a situation. So of course, there's going to be accounts on Polymarket, and Polymarket is fascinating to have a look at. If anyone that's
Yeah.
interested in any kind of geopolitical event, it's much better at predicting the future than any news magazine or anything else. People are putting the real money on the line.
Yeah, against other people as well, and it's like not against the house. I mean, I'm not trying to push Polymarket. They don't sponsor our channel, and I have tried to set up an account, but I think in the UK there's limited, even with a VPN, there's limited amount of things you can do. But yeah, it is extremely
It's
fascinating.
interesting.
Thank you very much, and yeah, into the next.
Thanks, Hector.